Welcome, Mariam. We are starting with this wonderful initiative under SDNX and Helium Learning Labs. So, this initiative, what we call is Women of Multiple Background in Space, short for WOMBS, for making it easy for everybody to make it famous and also easy to pronounce. So what is the aim of creating this webinar series is that, space is becoming the highlight of the hour, and in the coming decades, it will be one of the predominant industries. And this initiative is created to highlight the women community's contributions in the space industry. So there are lots of inspiring women which I encountered during my journey into the space sector. So they've inspired me so much, but the path they have took is it's full of unconventional background, and there's lots of struggles they have faced. So this webinar series will highlight what path women have taken to reach space sector, and also how they are performing now and what wonders they have created in the space industry. So that's a little bit about me. I'm your host. I'm an aerospace engineer from India, currently working as many things like a researcher, as chief training officer. I'm also a space educator. And right now I joined this beautiful community, Blue Space. And you can find me also at the website of Habitat Mart as a researcher and also as an analog astronaut, and various other platforms, for example, NASA RCNs, where I work for various projects on astrobiology, astrobotany, space settlement, etc. So you can reach out to me anytime. Now I'm introducing you to Mariam. She's our first guest for this W.O.M.B.S webinar. She's many things, it's pretty much interesting, and she's the right candidate to start our webinar with. So she's currently a visiting scholar with Blue Space, and also associated with lots of science projects with lots of NASA RCNs as well. She has a global and a multidisciplinary background. As a space consultant, she's also have been a field engineer, a manufacturer engineer, and also a business development manager. Now she is serving as the national point of contact for Canada with SGAC, and also coordinator for Next Gen Plenary with the IAF, that is the International Astronautical Federation. Mariam is many things, and she will go ahead and show her wonderful presentation for us, and we'll start with that. Thank you, Mariam. I'll stop sharing. You can share your screen and go ahead with your wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I really appreciate it. Let me see if I can share my presentation with you. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I got to where I am today. It wasn't a very direct path, but I'm very grateful for all the experiences. And when I'm sharing this with you, it's not just to talk about everything I've done, but to share that. Keep in mind when you're hearing about all of this that it's possible for you to enter the space sector no matter what your background. You have transferable skills, and it's never too late. So keep those things in your mind as you hear this. Also to share, my journey in space started 2 years ago. So I'm fairly new to this sector, and I'm very humbled to be speaking to you today, but I have worked in other industries before, and I'll talk to you about how that sort of happened. So one of the questions Elon had asked me in the questionnaire she sent was, what was my inspiration? Why did I get interested in space? So growing up, it all started with sci-fi. I was very interested in reading about science fiction. Things like Star Trek really influenced me growing up. And also like looking at different movies, books, where we're thinking about humanity's future in space and those complex issues that arise from being a multiplanetary species, encountering other life forms. What could the technologies look like as we venture into space? What could living in space look like? And those things were really sparking my interest growing up. But what I realized was I come from a developing country originally, and though space was in my mind, I didn't really know that this could be a career option for me because my country didn't have a human spaceflight program, and there wasn't very many people around me that were doing aerospace activities, either as engineers or otherwise. So there was, to be honest, this cultural pressure to get a degree that would result in, you know, gainful employment and something that was more widely accepted in my community. And hence I followed the not very original path of doing electrical engineering, similar to what my parents had already done. I moved to the US for this. I did my undergrad at UT Austin, and I did learn a lot. In hindsight, I'm very grateful that I had that technical training, because when you're 18, like when you're just starting out and thinking about college, not very many people know exactly what they want to do in life. So that first degree, yeah, it can be hard sometimes to make that decision. What should it be? And like I said, there might be various factors that influence that decision. But looking back on it, I'm quite grateful that I got that opportunity to study engineering. And it even helps me to this day, like thinking analytically, the problem solving capabilities that I developed, it's helped me throughout my career. And so after that, though I was thinking about space in the US, as I mentioned, I was an international student. There were challenges entering the US space sector as an international student. And back in the day when I did my undergrad, there wasn't really too much happening on the new space side. So commercial space wasn't as hot as it is today with SpaceX and, you know, Virgin Galactic and all these like hundreds of new space startups doing things with small satellites. All of that was not very big at that time. So in my mind, like I knew about NASA and I knew about the big aerospace primes like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, etc. And so when I would go to career fairs in Austin, Texas, I would go to those companies, and typically, like being international, the conversation didn't get very far. And so I ended up in Texas, the oil and gas industry is really big. So I ended up joining the oil and gas sector. I got hired by a company called Schlumberger, which is one of the largest oil field service providers in the world. And this was sort of my second path. I'm like, okay, well, if space isn't working for me right now, like what's the other really adventurous thing I want to do? So I signed up for their program called Tech and Field, which was a rotation program where you spend a year and a half on a rig at any international location. So the pictures you see here, the one in the middle, it's from my time on the Russian oil rig. It was on Sakhalin Island, so a very remote place. Yeah, and I think sometimes it's very interesting to push yourself out of your comfort zone. So I had done this twice now, moving from my country to the US. I didn't experience much culture shock in that transition, but going from the US to Russia was a huge change in culture. There were language barriers. The island I worked in was very remote and not a lot of people spoke English, for example. So there were a lot of challenges with integrating. I learned a lot about myself during that time. It was very physically and mentally demanding in a very high pressure operational environment. But I'm really glad I did that experience, because I feel like it was definitely one of the most defining experiences in my life to this point, going through that training process and working on the rig. After that, I was transferred back to their manufacturing center in Houston. So the same company, I had ended my rotation in Russia. I moved back to Houston. I was working as a manufacturing engineer. So now helping to build the drilling tools that we were shipping to the rigs, the tools that I had run on the rig previously. And I was on the real-time drilling and measurements team. So think about drilling and exploring the subsurface for hydrocarbon reservoirs. That's what we were doing basically. And now we're helping to build that technology in the manufacturing center. So around this time, I had been working 3 years in the oil and gas industry already. I was getting very specialized in oil and gas drilling technology. But the industry was going through a downturn. So this was a very bad crash in the commodity price of oil around 2016. It started when I had first moved back around, I want to say 2015-ish, 2014. And it just was getting worse and worse. And with Texas, it's sort of the hub of oil and gas, and there's a lot of energy companies there. So you were seeing it across the industry, not just in my company. At that time, again, being international, there was some insecurity around my visa situation, which was tied to the company. So I decided to move to Canada, and I'm in Canada today. So this was around 5 years ago now, where I moved to Canada to do, and I was looking at options at that time for grad school. I thought I wasn't really sure at that point if I wanted to pursue engineering at the graduate level. And I was looking for options that would give me a little bit more diverse experience. And so I decided to pursue an MBA at the University of Toronto. And with this experience, it did deliver on the promise of opening up a lot of doors for me. So with an MBA, you kind of become a generalist. A lot of people do this degree to maybe switch industries. So they might be doing one thing and they want to go into another one, or move into a management position in the same industry, or develop a new skill set. Like say they want to do project management or consulting or investment banking. All those options are open to you depending on what classes you take during the MBA and how you sort of position your career trajectory. I also want to highlight one of the most important skills I learned during this degree was the power of networking. I do feel as an engineer, there is not so much emphasis put on developing those social networking skills. It wasn't really something that was taught to me or encouraged at that point in my life. But as an MBA student, there was such a heavy emphasis. Like they literally call it the coffee chat, where you go and you reach out to people, you set up 30-minute chats over coffee, you learn about their career, and you're basically building your own personal network to advance your career. And this was really critical, and I'll explain how this helped me with moving into space later as well. And so after my MBA, I still wasn't thinking about space as a career. So it was still a passion. I was watching the latest developments that were happening in the news. It was really funny. Like wherever I would be working, I would be looking at on the side during lunch break the latest like launch that is happening in the Falcon 9, or what are some of the interesting developments happening, who's going to space, what are astronauts doing up there. But I didn't really think it could be a career for me still at this point. So after my MBA, I joined a quantum computing startup because I was still interested in emerging technologies and I knew that I wanted to work in that space. So I joined this deep tech startup. They were looking at photonic quantum computing. It was very early stages. They wanted to understand what market they should be entering, how to get pilot customers, how to raise funds. So the pictures I've shared here at the bottom are actually from the trip I made with the founder of that company to Silicon Valley. So we spent a week out there visiting different venture capital firms, pitching quantum computing as a potential solution to various business problems. It was an exciting and interesting time for me, but ultimately what I realized working at that startup was that culture is very key. In these early stage startups, typically the founding team and the core team defines what the culture of the company is going to be like. And ultimately it wasn't a fit for me. And so I moved on. I joined a bank, one of the largest banks in Canada called CIBC, where I was still looking at emerging technologies. So they wanted to think about quantum computing, but from a financial perspective, artificial intelligence, blockchain. In this role, I was doing a lot of consulting and market research activities. So looking at reports, looking at what competitors are doing, putting together presentations, and then sharing this with the senior executives at the bank. Around this time, I also began to go to a lot of conferences. So my team was really great. They sponsored a lot of these career development sort of activities where you could attend the latest hackathon or innovation conference or networking event. And so they would sponsor me to go and look at these different presentations, say on like blockchain in Toronto, like there's maybe a developer conference or something else like that. So I would go to these conferences and I would look at really inspiring women who are typically leading their own startups. So I would be looking at presentations from female founders in emerging technologies. At that point of my life, I wasn't sure if what I wanted to do was entrepreneurship. I wanted to feel like inspired. And I was trying to figure out, how do these women who are so successful, who are leading these companies, how do they figure out what they want to do? Like, how did this person know that she wants to be a managing director in a blockchain company, for example? Like, how did she decide blockchain was her thing? And so in conversations like this, it was interesting because it came up that I am interested in space. Like sometimes you need another person to have a conversation with you to validate that this is what you really want to do in your life. This is what your interest is. Because literally, as I was talking to one of these ladies, she told me, like, I literally see your eyes sparkle when you talk about space. So you should think about like pursuing this as a career. And I told her, well, I don't even know where to begin. Like in Canada, I'm not even sure what the opportunities are. How do I pursue this? I just didn't know anyone in the community or what was happening. And so I decided to give it a shot. I was literally networking a lot. So sending a lot of cold messages on LinkedIn, reaching out to people via email, both at the Canadian Space Agency, at private companies. And I realized that when I started looking at the industry again, that the new space age was happening, right? Space was getting very commercialized. There was a huge rise of startups and private players. Technology revolutions were happening. Reusable launch was becoming a thing. Miniaturization of satellites. There were so many technical innovations happening, which was causing this industry to just blow up, right? So yeah, I put myself out there. I was working full time at the bank still, but it took me like 6 to 8 months. So it wasn't an easy transition. It was full time work for 6 to 8 months and then networking on the side as well, on weekends in the evening to connect with people in the space industry in Canada. Around this time, I also started volunteering a lot. So I joined, initially the organizers talked about Space Generation Advisory Council. This is one of the nonprofit organizations that I started working with to build my networks and understand the opportunities globally as well and to contribute to this community. And I realized that space, there's so many opportunities out there. And this is one of the points I want to convey to you during this talk is not one of the biggest myths is that space is just for engineers and scientists. This is not the case. If you start looking, there's so many opportunities out there for you, no matter what your skill set. So there are people who are doing art. They're literally space artists. There are people who are helping with marketing, both in smaller companies and also bigger organizations. There are economists, so space agencies hire chief economists to think about the space economy and policies that governments should be implementing. People are thinking about future settlements in space, so there are people who are doing architecture. They call themselves space architects. There's even programs, educational programs around this, where you think about design and conditions that you might need to live in space. And then also on the finance side, there's so much activity with a lot of venture capital investment in small startups, which also means a lot of hiring by these venture capitalist firms for people who have finance backgrounds to help with that vetting of those companies and the due diligence. So there was a lot happening. I didn't know that this was the case, but looking at that landscape and through some of my networking and volunteer activities, I was connected to a firm in Montreal. So I moved to another city in Canada to pursue my interest, and I joined their firm as a space consultant. So what does that mean? What is a space consultant? So that was the start of my space journey a little over 2 years ago, a year and a half actually. And I basically worked on multiple projects. I was interfacing with satellite operators, space industry players, government agencies, mostly the Canadian Space Agency, and assisting with strategic, financial, and economic investments assessments for their projects. So they would come in, they would put out a contract, our company would bid for it, and then we would help with a lot of market research, interviews, and providing our own critical strategic analysis on what they should be doing to address this problem from a business perspective. And actually, a lot of the work I was doing as a space consultant leveraged my skills from the MBA. So my business degree, it wasn't really my engineering degree, but it was the business analysis skills mostly that were used in this job. So just to tell you, there's a place for everyone in the space sector, no matter what your background. Doesn't necessarily just have to be technical. And so what do I do today? So at that time when I was working at the space consulting firm, COVID hit, pandemic caused troubles. I moved back to Toronto, and I also had realized that though I found commercial space very exciting and interesting, I was still wanting to figure out exactly what my role in space would be. And I really wanted to do something technical, something where I felt like I could make a bigger contribution using both my skill sets, not just the business one, but also some of the technical training I had. And I thought to myself, well, do I want to do something in engineering again in space? Is that what I want to try? Am I maybe thinking about aerospace engineering? And I realized that I wanted to answer and start asking some of the bigger science questions. In particular, what really piqued my interest was thinking about the potential for life beyond Earth. So now I was moving into the space science sort of realm, right? Like complete change. And I realized that there was a field called astrobiology. I didn't really know this was a thing. I didn't know that there was a community of scientists, engineers, people from different backgrounds thinking about astrobiology and life beyond Earth, and how do you look for that life, and what technologies do you develop, and what kind of questions do you ask. And so I started reaching out to people again. So I started my networking, and this also was happening during my full-time job. When I was doing my consulting, I started having some of those initial conversations and reaching out to scientists at NASA, people at Blue Marble. One of the first astrobiologists I talked to actually was my mentor at Blue Marble Space. And he referred a lot of interesting research coordination networks at NASA that I should join. And these are open communities where you can participate in workshops. They have conferences. I started reading papers. And that was kind of my entry point into this whole field of planetary science and particularly astrobiology. So I joined Blue Marble in a more formal capacity as a visiting scholar, where I work on science communication projects with my mentor. I also ended up connecting with a scientist at NASA Goddard and the University of Maryland College Park, who works on ice shell compositions for ocean worlds as a project that he's leading right now. He's an astrobiologist, and I was very interested in his research. And the way I made that connection as well was expressing interest. Like, I had attended his webinar, and I highly encourage you to do this. Like, start getting information on things you like. Attend webinars, attend conferences, and then reach out to people later. 70% of the time you will get a response, and don't be discouraged if you don't, because people are also really busy. Sometimes you send a follow-up email, sometimes you reach out to someone else. But if you're persistent, you will eventually find someone who's willing to work with you and who's willing to guide you. So I reached out to him after his presentation. I said, I'm interested in your research, and that's how we started working together. And I work with him to this day, helping on this project and gaining a lot of really interesting research experience along the way. I continue to be affiliated with the Space Generation Advisory Council as the national point of contact for Canada, where I help to lead initiatives for space outreach, space education, for basically students and young professionals in our community here. I'm an advisor for SEDS Canada, and they're doing some really amazing projects, which I help to support in a personal capacity, if I may. And as Elon mentioned, I'm with the International Astronautical Federation, where I help to organize the next generation plenary along with my co-organizer. I also advise Zenith Canada Pathway. So this is similar to the W.O.M.B.S fellowship that was launched in the US. They're doing a similar fellowship program in Canada, the first of its kind, where we want to provide opportunities for career development and basically professional networking and internships to these students in Canada. And the first actually batch of this fellowship, the first fellows are being selected this year. So I'm very excited to help support that process. And where can you start? So talking about all of this, how can you start? Like, it seems very daunting sometimes. Like, what do you do to begin, right? And my personal story, I started volunteering because that helped me understand what options were available, what the different communities were like, and what was going on in this sector, right? And as I mentioned, I already spoke to you about some of the organizations I'm a part of, SGAC. I helped with SEDS, but there are so many others, right? Like, there's tons of organizations you can start affiliating yourself with in a volunteer basis initially. So there's Planetary Society, Mars Society. There's also specific ones for women in aerospace. So there's the Women in Aerospace, WIA. There's Space for Women by UNOSA. But definitely make sure that you balance the commitments. Like, this was something I learned initially, is I started volunteering everywhere. I was so excited by space, but make sure you have enough time to balance your work and these commitments as well. Make sure you join organizations that speak to your values and that will help you either with your personal or career growth. So it is definitely a two-way sort of relationship. So make sure you vet out organizations before you start volunteering your time. You can also learn about space easily. The entry point is quite low initially. If you just want to start learning, you can look at a ton of online courses on different platforms. If you have the resources and time, you can apply to institutions like the International Space University. Bear in mind that the degrees you will get from them, like they have a summer course, I know they have a master's course, it will not typically be accredited. You can look this up. So don't go there thinking that this will help you move on to a PhD, for example, but this will help you with your professional development, with understanding the different disciplines in space, with growing your network in the space sector, your global network. So that's kind of what this institution is mostly geared towards. Also networking, and especially in the virtual age, I would highly encourage you to reach out to people on LinkedIn. Don't be scared. If there's people doing things that you're interested in, send them a message. Please include a message when you're sending that connection request. It's always polite. It explains why you're reaching out, and connect with them. Follow their activities. They might share different events or different kind of programs that you could apply to, and keep an eye on what they're doing. And also ask for advice, ask how they got to where they are. don't be afraid to send out cold emails as well. Starting out new in an industry, you don't know everyone who's working in that industry, right? You need to start making connections. And it was the same for me. I knew no one. So every email I sent was a cold email. There wasn't really someone introducing me to someone else saying, oh, you should talk to Mariam, because no one knew me. So don't be scared to send those emails, to put yourself out there. You might not get responses all the time, but be persistent. Like, something I like to do is I send one email, I have a reminder in my calendar to send a follow-up email next week, because I know people get hundreds of emails. So be persistent. And as I mentioned, sign up for webinars, workshops on topics that interest you. A lot of them these days are free because of the virtual situation we're in. Attend conferences, some of the big ones in space. One of them is coming up at the end of the year. I think this is going to be in person this time in Dubai, but it was actually virtual last year, the International Astronautical Congress. And when you're reaching out to people, I would say position it as seeking advice. So ask them how they got to where they are, if they have any advice for you, where you are in your career journey. Come in with questions that are specific and that highlight what you're trying to achieve. Do not ask for jobs up front, because most people are not in a position to just give you a job. But as your relationship progresses, don't be afraid to ask for, even opportunities for collaboration potentially. And I put this in the very end. It's so important when you're looking at programs online, different awards, grants, opportunities to attend conferences that require applications. Please apply. Like, for different jobs you want. One of the biggest things we can do, one of the biggest mistakes, is to self-sabotage yourself. You might think that you don't have all the capabilities or you don't fill all the requirements for a job, but even if you don't meet every single thing in that list, if you are eligible and you are interested, please apply. Put yourself out there, because you never know what opportunity you might actually get. So don't stop yourself from accessing these opportunities just because you think you might not make it. That's one of the biggest takeaways. Like, I applied to a lot of things, and that opened up a lot of doors for me. And so this is basically my last slide, where I want to sum up some of these thoughts. So a quote that I recently read that I really like and probably summarizes my journey well is, you cannot swim for new horizons until you have courage to lose sight of the shore. I'm not to say that, everyone should just go all in and leave all their different commitments behind. I made a lot of changes in my career. It's definitely a leap of faith. Like, every change I made from one industry to another, or one role to another, was a leap of faith. There is inherent risk to making these changes in your career, and you have to be comfortable with that. So you have to assess your comfort level with making these changes in your career. At the same time, it is a gamble. Like, you are taking a huge gamble on your capabilities, and you believe that you have the skills and you have what it takes to, start from the ground up in a new industry, hit the ground running, and you're kind of banking on your passion, motivation, persistence, and the skills you have. So it is definitely a leap of faith, but it's worth it. Like, if this is the path you want to take, then go for it 100%. If I did it, I believe you can do it as well. And I did this much later in my career. But I did want to say that it's not always an easy road. Like, if you want to start following your passions and you want to do all these things, you can be ready to experience rejections. There will be a lot of no's. There will be setbacks. Things can happen. Pandemics can happen. There will be people along the way who will tell you you can't do it, or you're not a fit. Don't take it personally, because if your belief in yourself was so little, then anything anyone can say will make you feel like you should give up. So you have to feel very strongly that this is the path you want to take. So don't give up. And your passion will show. Follow your instincts, follow your interests. It's never too late to do this if this is what you want. Don't have regrets later in life. Do it now. And you do have transferable skills. So whatever you've done in the past is not a waste. Like, your journey up until this point, either if you're just starting out, you're a student, you're just applying to jobs in the space industry, or like myself, you've worked in other industries and you want to make this change, you have transferable skills. The things you've done in previous industries, you bring a lot to the table. Seek mentors. So especially when starting out in a new industry, or maybe even in your first career, it's so important to have advocates, people who are willing to mentor you, who share advice, who lead the way by opening the door for others. You need people like that who are going to share opportunities with you and basically vouch for you, and that really helped me a lot. I have mentors not only in the space sector, and I have a variety of them. So both formal and informal. And sometimes people ask me, they're like, and I used to think this myself, like, how can I get a mentor? How can I ask someone? Do I just go up and say, will you be my mentor? And it's not really like that. It can be very informal. So most of the time it happens with people you work with. So a supervisor, you end up doing a good job, you form a relationship of mentorship where, they see your potential and they want to help you. For example, this happened with me when I was at the bank. So one of my mentors even today is a former director at the bank I used to work with, who really encouraged me to follow my interest in space. And to this day, like there was a point over a year ago where I was like, okay, should I continue down the space road or should I go back and work at a bank or in the broader technology space? And he told me to keep on going for space, even though he's not in the sector. He's like, Mariam, I can see the passion you have, and there's not very many people in life who know exactly what they want to do and have the opportunity to do it. So you have to keep on trying. So you need people like that, right? And as I said, keep on applying. Please apply to things, because I also believe very much in this quote, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So if you're not going to apply for something, that means you already failed, right? And also opportunities exist where you least expect them to. So with that, I'd close my presentation and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sure. Thank you. That was wonderful, Mariam. She just pretty much summarized what is this webinar aimed at, So this is what we are expecting to give to the next generation, like to welcome them into the space industry, what you need, what the path you have followed, and whatever the struggles they have faced, everything. So Mariam pretty much in her presentation, she summarized everything, starting from wherever you are, whatever you do, you can get into space sector. You will always have transferable skills, because space is transdisciplinary. It is not just multidisciplinary, it is transdisciplinary. Whatever you are, you can definitely link it with the space sector. You can you are from any background, say it engineering or anything, arts, or even arts and science and management are getting into space sector these days. And we are living examples for that. You have to keep two things in your mind: volunteering and networking. So these two are your two eyes when you get into any new sector. So as Mariam has explained it very clearly, volunteer. There are, lots of international organizations which you don't have to travel to any other country to work with. Right now, me and Mariam, it's just been, 1 year or 1.5 years since we entered into the actual space sector. But we are working with NASA scientists on a daily basis. How is it possible? It's because of volunteering, and it's because of networking. Reach out to people. There are always people who will be there to encourage you, to motivate you, and to guide you. But you have to be courageous to face a no. As Mariam has said, there will always be cold mails and cold calls, because pretty much people are busy these days with everything going in the virtual way. So you have to be practical in taking no. It's not because they are they don't want to reply you. Pretty much they'll be just busy. So it's just how you are passionate and determined to get into the space industry. If you are much deterministic to get into this industry, I assure you there are lots of people to help you, and me and Mariam are a living example for that. We just pretty much started our journey roughly a year ago. I distinctly remember my journey when it started just in one conference which happened in the September month, which is Astrobiology Australasia meeting. I interacted with nearly 20 to 30 scientists, and everybody inspired me so much. And I contacted everybody through their mail and through their LinkedIn accounts, and you won't believe me, everybody replied to me. And that's the beauty of inclusion in the space sector. Everybody is there to welcome you, because your skills are very, very, very much transferable into space sector. And wherever you are, whichever country you are, whatever you're doing right now, you can easily get into the space industry with right amounts of resources. And in a practical sense of way, I am very much thankful that everything shifted into a virtual world, because that has opened me so much of opportunities. As Mariam told, apply, apply, apply. I've applied to everything I came across. Eventbrite, LinkedIn, and few other platforms, they are my tools. I access them on a daily basis to get in connected with the every scientist who are similar to my career path. So you can get into LinkedIn or get into Eventbrite to check about what webinars which ignites your interest is happening. Attend them and get to know more about people, and message them through LinkedIn or mail, and that's how you start your journey. That's how we have started our journey. So this initiative, the W.O.M.B.S initiative, highlights women who come from an unconventional background. And here you go, Mariam is a very, very best example, I could say. And this is our journey, participants. So I'd like to discuss something with Mariam as well. So, Mariam, do you think we need more people in the space industry?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thanks for that great summary. For sure, I think space is truly the economy of the future. Like I mentioned my
Yeah.
interest in sci-fi, right? And so
Mhm.
for me, I think about the low Earth economy. If you look at NASA's strategic plan anyways, right? They want to think about the moon now with the Artemis project and beyond. So
Yes.
thinking about Mars exploration and lower Earth orbit, so ISS and near Earth is now being commercialized, right? So opportunities are opening up for commercial companies. So we are seeing an
Sure.
expansion of humanity slowly into space. Those sci-fi dreams are going to come true eventually, and we will have an in-space economy. In order to sustain an economy, you need to have more people. So industries will be built, corporations will emerge, even more corporations than what we have today. So I only see opportunity increasing. And this means, yes, we definitely need people to fill those opportunities.
True. So speaking of people into space industry, so we have organizations like Moon Village Association, and how privatization is speeding in the space sector with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Everybody is in a space race 2.0 right now. So what is Moon Village Association is that you can start your volunteering from there. It's a organization affiliated with European Space Agency, where volunteers like me, I've involved with MBA. I pretty much think Mariam and many other space professionals are involved, with MBA as well. So we are aiming to create a global moon village in the year of 2050. And Mariam has released her Eagle report on, how to enhance the governance of the lunar, economy in the future. So Mariam, if you want to give few points about your work on Eagle Report with SGAC, you're welcome.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for highlighting the Moon Village Association. They're doing some great stuff. I'm not directly affiliated with that organization, but we did consult with them as part of the
Yes.
SGAC
Mm-hmm.
report, and they're doing some really wonderful work thinking about humanity's future in space on the
Mm-hmm.
moon. So with SGAC, I represent a team called the Eagle Team. It
Yes.
was 14 of us, I believe, across different disciplines again. So engineers, consultants, scientists, space lawyers, a huge breadth of geologists, people coming together. And we spent almost 9 months working on this project, thinking about the young generation's perspective for humanity's future on the moon. And what should that lunar governance look like? What are some of the key strategic things we should be thinking about? And how do we propose a way forward? Which involved a lot of interviews with stakeholders like Moon Village Association, like Open Lunar Foundation. We talked to space agencies like representatives from NASA, for example, to get perspectives both from the agency side, the commercial side, the nonprofit side, and come together and produce a cohesive report, which was then presented by our team lead, Antonio Salimeri, who's actually a space law student. He's doing his PhD at the University of Luxembourg. He presented that on behalf of SGAC to the United Nations at the COPUS committee. That just happened, I believe it was last month. And we got some great reception on that report. So it's a really good starting point to begin this conversation from the perspective of the next generation. And if you're interested, I can drop a link here in the chat for
Sure.
people who want to join as advocates for this Eagle initiative. So you can express that you support this initiative. And in the future, there might even be ways to get involved with this.
Sure, Mariam. I'm a proud Eagle advocate as well.
Okay, awesome. That's great.
Yeah, so what's with lunar governance or policy making? How did governance and policy making come into space sector? Is that we are navigating beyond Earth, and in several decades, we'll be there on other planets, transferring signals from planet to planet. That will happen. So everybody has, access into space industry right now. That's where, creating a peaceful community of humans on other planets, we should not waste resources of other planets. So all the rules have to be formulated right now, and that's where, governance and policy making come into space sector right now. So it's pretty much, this is a big example that all your skills are valuable. It's in the, when you get into space industry. And one thing I want to highlight from Mariam's talk as well, shifting your career path can be difficult, and when you are in a different country, it can be, a cultural shock as well to you, with difference of languages, navigating from your home country to another country. It affects us in a lot of ways. With even if we graduate from different country, there are rules like, US has ITAR rules, so you can't work from it. But right now we are living in a era of, everything going virtual. So that's where, lots of online volunteering opportunities organizations have come with. I started my journey just a year back in the pandemic, but I've been involved with more than 10 organizations. How is it? It's because of the, online world, and lots of people like us coming forward to open opportunities for the next generation. So you can get involved pretty much from wherever you are. So you don't have to feel any cultural shock. And I'm pretty sure space sector is so welcoming. I've never, experienced something as welcoming as space sector, and that's one of the beauty of it. And you'll pretty much experience lots of other beauties of space sector once you get into it. And also, why we are doing all these things, where we are leading, where is space sector driving everybody. So that's where this question comes: can we help Earth by getting into space? Mariam, can you add few points on this question? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a question that comes up a lot, especially when people also think about funding a lot of the space initiatives. They talk about what are the benefits to Earth. But here it's very, very important to highlight that a lot of the investment and the time that goes into space technology development and exploration initiatives have a direct impact on Earth. Like when we think about connectivity, telecommunication satellites have played a key role for global connectivity on Earth. And there are a lot of companies that have different broadband initiatives to bridge this digital divide and provide connectivity to even rural and underdeveloped areas. There's also Earth observation activities happening with satellites, again, that help to monitor wildfires, illegal activities, fishing activities, tons of things. Search and rescue can happen as well by using these satellites. And as I said, with a lot of miniaturization and nano satellites coming up, we have more and more potential for different technology applications that are going to directly impact the standard of our life on Earth. But beyond that, when we start thinking about human space exploration and putting humans further and further into space, a lot of the experiments that have happened on the ISS have directly impacted the quality of life here on Earth, right? Thinking about testing different medicines, different technologies that in that extreme environment help to inform ways that people could even live in extreme environments here on Earth today. So it's very interesting. For example, like I could give you an example. Recently, there was a deep space food challenge that was launched by the CSA and NASA, where they're thinking about novel food production
I'm
technologies,
part
right?
of it.
Oh, that's really exciting. So you can talk more about that. Yeah. And just thinking about that. And yes, they're thinking about it from the perspective of developing this food sustainably for space exploration, but it's going to have a direct impact on communities here on Earth that are in very arid environments and climates that are very harsh and extreme. So a lot of this would help those communities as well in those kinds of environments.
Yes, I would like to add a few points on Mariam's points. So there is a division called space sustainability. Sorry. So the division is also there with, I think, UNUSA and SGS if you want to get partnered. But what is space sustainability? Is that, one big example is analog environments. So what is analog research or analog environments is that there are few places on Earth which is similar to other planets. Take Mars, there are a few places on Earth like the Utah Desert, few places in Poland. So they are very similar to the atmosphere which is present in Mars. What we do is we set up a research base over there. We put astronauts and simulate the experiences what they will have if they go to another planets. So that is called something as an analog research, and people who undergo it are called analog astronauts. So they tend to research on various things like how to live on another planet, what food will they cultivate, is it the gravity of other planets, will it affect the physiology of humans when they transfer to other planets, etc. So one such research I'm involved with is how to produce food in extreme conditions. So when we think of cultivating or making everything from scratch, for food protection in space or in low Earth gravity, it's pretty much very tough for anybody to research on or to explain here. So agriculture on Earth, doing it from scratch itself is a very challenging task. So imagine doing it on another planet, or even in zero gravity or radiation filled environment. So what is the end result? If we are able to produce food resources in an extreme environment, we'll be able to do it on the areas on Earth which have lost their sustainability or turned into a arid or a semi-arid land. So we can change uncultivable lands to cultivable lands and increase agriculture on an earthly basis. So that will help the next generation to get more, knowledge about how to grow your own food, which is very important. And that's, this is a beautiful point where you can, remediate Earth from space perspective. So that's where we'll be leading into climate change. Mariam, how do you think we can mitigate climate change when we get into help of space exploration or space research?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, there's a lot of interesting Earth observation satellites and initiatives where they're looking at, wildfire monitoring and tracking, for example, that might be happening due to also climate change, but other activities as well. And also monitoring the different ways our atmosphere is changing, the levels of methane. There's some really interesting startups as well that are starting to look at greenhouse gas monitoring. One of them is actually in Canada, GHGSat. So not just at the agency level, because space agencies typically have larger, big budget initiatives to look at things like climate change, how is the Earth being changed by human activities, what are some of the most vulnerable areas, but there are also startups beginning to think about these green initiatives and ways to use space to monitor what's happening on Earth.
Yes, I agree on that. Space applications are applicable to every other industry, and a good initiative we all can come together and take is let's use space for the sustainability or biodiversity conservation, or to help humanity gain sustainable development in the coming years. So there are lots of things space industry can do for people on a very different levels of experiences. One such experience is something called an overview effect. So, Mariam, can you tell me what is an overview effect, and how do you think, in a scientific or a philosophical standpoint, it helps humanity to see Earth differently and to mitigate, maybe climate change or aim for a sustainable development in future?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Well, I have yet to experience the overview effect myself. It is typically experienced, this term was coined by philosopher and author Frank White in his book. And it came from him talking and interviewing a lot of astronauts who have experienced this effect where they go to space, and then from space, when you look upon Earth as a whole, as this like blue marble, as we call him, the blue marble initiative that we are, like when you look at this ball of Earth hanging in deep space and you see that there are no divisions, there are no boundaries between countries and between people, looking at Earth as a whole, you get that perspective of humanity as one, and also the preciousness of Earth, like how important it is to preserve our planet. And I believe that causes a fundamental shift philosophically in the way people think who have had this experience. And many of them come back to Earth and get involved in initiatives to counter things like climate change, to increase diversity, equity, inclusion within their communities, because ultimately there's a shift in the way you think about your life and your planet by going out into space and looking at it from above. That's kind of the way I think about the overview effect. And I think it would be really a privilege to experience that myself someday. And I think with the way things are going in the space sector and how rapidly it's getting commercialized, I imagine a lot of us on this call might one day have the opportunity to go to space when launch costs go down. Who knows, right? Like, keep an eye on the industry and the developments. You never know when an opportunity might open up for you.
Very true. That we have to highlight this point because that's pretty much going to happen in the future. Mariam, I wish you all the best for your pilot training. I know you're undergoing one right now, and yeah, so we'll be in the future. We all may get a chance to experience the overview effect, and as the commercialization and privatization is happening, getting civilians into space will not be long in the future, I suppose. Initiatives from SpaceX, Space Hero Media, everybody, some way or the other aiming to send the civilians to space, to have inclusion in the space sector, to make every normal person understand what is an overview effect, or how you contribute to space sector, and to how you see Earth as one, to stop anything, any hatred which is spreading on an earthly scale. So it can be done on a whole scale manner from space. So that's how I see overview effect or sending civilians to space works in the future. So it's all, the beauty of space sector, as I keep on mentioning, is that you can help Earth from achieving space or getting into space. So that's it from our side. I'm going to check if we have any questions. Yeah, Vinay has a question. Do you think, is there any planet like Earth, Mariam ma'am? I mean, climate conditions, oceans, etc., like all facilities on Earth, like whether any planet is very similar to Earth.
Sorry, I was on mute. That's a great question. So to give you a little bit of context on this, back in the early 1990s is when the first exoplanet was discovered. So what I mean by exoplanet is you see all these other stars, right, in the night sky. So we found the first planet orbiting another star other than the sun, because up until then we didn't really know if there are other planets that even orbit stars, if that exists out there. So this field of exoplanet science is still pretty emerging. And one of the holy grails in this field is looking for signatures, like looking at atmospheric signatures through advanced telescopes to try to understand if these planets that we're seeing, all these exoplanets out there, some of them might have similar atmospheres to Earth, because that's the only way we can tell right now. They're really far away, right? But a lot of the people out there are doing modeling. They're trying to figure out ways to observe this using advanced telescopes to try to see if there are other exoplanets that might have similar conditions to Earth today. So this also falls within the branch of astrobiology. So far, there has been none confirmed yet that is exactly like Earth. And personally, if you ask my perspective, I think Earth is very precious. Like the way the things all lined up to have this climate that is conducive to our life and to this biosphere on Earth might in fact be quite unique. For everything to sort of map up exactly like this on another exoplanet, it might not be a one-to-one match, but there might be other variations of this theme, maybe other guesses that other types of life forms can in fact survive off of. And we don't know, right? We don't yet know much about other exoplanets out there and what kind of conditions they have, and if that might be conducive to supporting life, either Earth-like or otherwise. So it's still a field that is very active, and this is an unanswered question.
Yeah, so right now we have more than 4,200 exoplanets discovered, but we don't know anything about them. They are only into the catalog right now. But looking forward into future, there are lots of wonderful projects launching right now. At the end of this year, the James Webb Space Telescope, that is the JWST, is going to launch. It is, exclusively designed to look into the atmospheres of exoplanets and to search for biosignatures. Biosignatures is a very, very interesting field in astrobiology, what I mean by biosignatures is that you look into the atmosphere of other planets to search for any life constraints. So I'm working on a project, on biosignatures, and novel technologies which we can develop on Earth to search for biosignatures on other planets. So it's a very exciting field. Planetary science and exoplanet science have a really great future in in the coming decades. So if you want to give a try to hunt exoplanets or to look into other planets, space field is very welcoming right now as well. Mariam, you have another question. Like, apart from Mars, what would be the next viable planet to terraform?
Yeah, I answered that already in the chat. So I am not really an expert in terraforming, but I do think it is going to be Mars. That is going to be most likely in the near term. And perhaps the individual can look at some books by Robert Zubrin to get some insights on the ways he's proposing terraforming of Mars itself. But yeah, I think I really encourage intellectual curiosity. The internet is a treasure trove of information. So even if I don't have an answer for you, you're going to find an answer out there if these are things you're curious about. I do have to say that I need to leave shortly, but I'll quickly address one of the questions here, if that's okay, and then I'll have to depart.
Sure. Yes.
So I see someone is asking, how do you see yourself 10 years after in your field? Do you think women should be placed at leadership position in space industry? So firstly, yes, 100% yes. Women should be in leadership positions, not just in the space industry, but in any industry. I saw that there's a lot of room for improvement in the STEM field, so in technology more broadly as well. And we need to play a part, right? Like people like Elon, who's like organizing this webinar to raise awareness about women doing things in this industry. Myself trying to share my journey and inspire you. Everyone, if you on this call, you need to take your paths forward and inspire others, because this is how the movement starts. This is how people support each other to get into those leadership positions. And as for myself, 10 years from now, you might have seen already from my journey, I like making a lot of changes. I like trying new things. I think that's part of what really gets me excited, is trying and challenging myself in my career. So I don't really know yet what the next 10 years are going to look like. It depends a lot on my personal interests. Like my interests kind of guide me into different places. And so far I've been very fortunate with the support system I have. I have a very supportive partner financially, and even personally, I've been in a position to follow those interests. So that's what I plan to do for the next 10 years. And so with that, like, Ilana, I hand it over to you to close the session.
Mariam, we are so grateful and thankful for you for you to join us today. Thank you so much for considering joining here. And yeah, so we'll be taking over from here. Have a great day, Mariam. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, so Nitin, I
Hi.
would like to answer the questions first.
Sure. Go ahead.
There are a few questions. Yeah, so Manjari has asked about what is dark matter. So even scientists haven't found, any evidence of, not evidence, any scientific proof for dark matter yet. We just know 95% of the universe is composed of dark matter, and it consumes everything when the universe goes cold. But maybe our perception, human perception, or the technology we have right now is not that enhanced to understand dark matter. But particle physics is the field which deals with dark matter, and it is growing heavily nowadays. And maybe in a few decades, just like how we discovered Higgs boson, the God particle, we will unlock the mystery of dark matter in the future too. So keep updated on the news. Shivika has asked, what do you think of aliens would look like? So, Shivika, that would depend on what kind of, atmospheric or geologic inventories they have evolved. Take Earth. We can speak only of Earth because we are the only aliens we know till now. We haven't discovered any aliens, but even that is happening. Keep your eyes on the news. Astrobiology is one field which deals with aliens, and that's blooming tremendously also. So from an Earth perspective, we are carbon-based life, sustaining on nitrogen, oxygen, and pretty much other elements which make up life. But the chemical makeup of other planets, where they are situated from its star, etc., will determine how an alien would look like. So if an alien is in a water planet like Enceladus or Europa, they would be pretty much an octopus which has evolved with many hands and UV protected skin, So that would how alien in ocean world would look like. And if you're going to hunt for other aliens, they would typically look like how the planet's chemistry has evolved them. So our chemistry has evolved us as carbon based, so they can be silicon based or phosphorus based. They can have one eye or 4 ears. We don't know. So we just have to hunt ourselves, and you are welcome to hunt because Spacefield is welcoming. So Vinay has asked, now I'm studying BSc Physics. Can you suggest me a path to become a scientist? So physics is the, mathematics and physics is the language of universe. So if you are studying physics, you can pretty much connect to anywhere in the space industry. If you want to look into data, you can become an astrophysicist. If you want to hunt for alien worlds, you can become a geophysicist. So there are lots of fields. You just have to learn and learn a lot to understand which field or which topic interest you so much, so that you can shift your career path in for your specialization or for your PhD or for your postdoc. So you can be transferable in space science. So anywhere you land, you can be a scientist, a very good scientist, with skills like science communication, as Sakshi has asked. It is also one of the major field of science, I believe. Science communication is one of the skills which a scientist must have, in my perspective. So science communication is very much important to make everybody come closer to science on a daily basis. That's how science communication works in science industry or anywhere where science is involved.